Honoring Freedom. If you're ever in Mexico on September 16th, you'll find yourself in the middle of a big celebration. You'll see parades, fireworks, food, confetti, toys, horseback riders, rodeos, and many happy people. September 16th is Mexican Independence Day. Mexicans are honoring their country's freedom. What is independence? Independence means self-rule. When Mexico won its independence, Mexicans were able to form their own government, control their own economy, and make their own laws. Mexicans felt their country's independence was worth the hard work and sacrifice. The first people in Mexico. Long before Mexico became a country, the land was inhabited by millions of people. These native peoples had lived on the land since time immemorial, before people from other lands started to arrive. There were 3 major civilizations, each with its own unique culture, but they shared some similarities in their ways of life. For many years, they hunted animals and gathered wild plants for food. Eventually, they began to farm. Their most important crop was maize, or corn. The first great civilization was the Olmec. They lived in the coastal lowlands along the Gulf of Mexico. The climate in that area allowed the Olmecs to grow and harvest maize twice a year. The abundant food production allowed the civilization to grow strong. The Olmec civilization ended around 200 BCE. The decline may have been due to environmental changes that decreased their water supply. The next major civilization, which started around 300 CE, was the Maya. By around 900 CE, the Maya were thriving. They excelled in architecture and art. They also made astronomy tables that were quite accurate and developed a mathematical system that included zero. Zero was an advanced concept for that time. Unlike the Olmecs, the Maya left written records of their lives, so historians know much more about them. Like the Olmecs, the Maya were another advanced civilization that declined suddenly. The exact reasons for this decline are uncertain, but possibilities include environmental changes, war, overpopulation, shifting trade routes, or a combination of these and other factors. The third great civilization was the Aztec. By 1430, the Aztecs ruled the land that would become known as the Valley of Mexico, and then they spread over the entire country. They built an impressive city called Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was on an island in Lake Texcoco. The city had 200,000 residents, with 400,000 more living nearby. In the early 1500s, there were about 1.2 million people living in this area, which Mexico City now occupies. In 1517, a Spanish ship led by Francisco Hernández de Córdoba sailed from Spain to Mexico. Mexico's native peoples had never seen white-skinned people, sailboats, cannons, gunpowder, or horses. They believed the Spaniards were gods who were led by Quetzalcoatl, a god of the tribes that the Aztecs had conquered. The Aztec emperor, Montezuma, gave the Spaniards gifts of jewelry made of precious stones, silver, and gold. The gifts made the Spaniards greedy for more riches. Before returning to Spain, they attacked native tribes, stealing more riches and kidnapping people to bring back to Spain. More Spaniards arrived by sea in April 1519. This time they were led by Hernán Cortés. Cortés hoped to take the land for himself, even though he was greatly outnumbered by native forces. Spanish rule. Cortés became allies with the Tlaxcalan Empire, a group that had long been among Montezuma's enemies. When Cortés, his men, and his allies marched into Tenochtitlan, they were amazed by the city's beauty, with every building painted white. Montezuma gave dinner parties for the Spaniards and invited them to stay. In response, Cortés imprisoned the Aztec ruler. Because indigenous people far outnumbered Spaniards, the alliance between the Tlaxcalan Empire and Cortez's men was necessary for Cortez's success. Later, Montezuma was killed, though it is not clear if he was killed by Spaniards or by his own people, angered by his actions. Soon more Spanish arrived to fight. Smallpox, a disease brought to Mexico by the Spanish, also killed many indigenous people, including Aztecs. By the time the Spaniards took control of Tenochtitlan, 2/3, or about 130,000 of the people of Tenochtitlan, were dead. By 1550, the Spanish ruled Mexico. Diseases such as smallpox brought from Europe weakened indigenous populations. There were about 20 million native people in Mexico when Spain colonized the country. 100 years later, there were only about 1.2 million native people left in all of Mexico. These diseases, and pre-existing rivalries between indigenous tribes, contributed greatly to Spain's success. Spain ruled for 3 centuries, calling the area New Spain. The conquerors' main goal was wealth, so they stole Mexican treasures. They also set up a system in which Spanish immigrants owned the land and enslaved many native people. This created 2 classes of people in Mexico, the very rich and the very poor. Over the years, some Spanish immigrants and indigenous people had children. These children had a mix of Spanish and indigenous heritage. As time went by, these mixed-race people became the majority. They considered themselves true Mexicans, not Spanish or native. By the beginning of the 1800s, the Mexican people yearned for their country to become independent. They were inspired by the way other countries fought to win freedom. Mexicans no longer wanted Spain to rule their country. They wanted to be a free country led by Mexicans. For that, they'd need a revolution, or a fight to replace the Spanish monarchy with their own form of government. Revolution. The Creoles were one group of Mexicans to think about revolution. They were born in Mexico to parents from Spain who had settled in Mexico. Compared to people living in Mexico who were born in Spain, the Creoles were regarded as second-class citizens. They didn't have the same privileges as those born in Spain. They were unhappy with their lack of political power and began to plan a revolution. The Spaniards learned of their plans, and the Creoles were forced to begin the revolution ahead of schedule. Very early on September 16, 1810, a priest named Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla rang the bell of his church in the town of Dolores. He yelled, "Viva Mexico!" and "Viva la Independencia!" This is known as the Cry of Independence. Hidalgo was calling out to Mexicans, urging them to fight Spanish rule and to claim Mexico for their own. Lord, if I have done well, thou knowest it. If ill, to thy infinite mercy I commend my soul. Last statement of José María Morelos y Pavón, prior to execution in 1815. By the end of October, 80,000 people had joined Hidalgo's army. Hidalgo's soldiers conquered 2 large cities and a few others, but they were defeated in the biggest city, Mexico City. In 1811, Hidalgo was captured and killed by the Spanish, but the fight for independence continued. The next leader of the rebellion was another priest, named José María Morelos y Pavón. He issued the first formal call for independence at a congress he held in 1813. He wrote up a constitution for a Mexican republic. However, in 1815, Morelos was also captured and killed by the Spanish. For the next 5 years, there was no real leader for Mexican independence, and by 1816, Spanish soldiers had killed most of the rebels. Spain's king forced Mexicans to pay taxes, and the king's harsh actions caused many Mexicans who hadn't taken part in the revolution to now turn against Spain. In 1820, there was a revolution in Spain, and the Creoles believed this would be a perfect time to try again for independence. In 1821, a Spanish colonel named Agustín de Iturbide was sent with 2,500 Spanish soldiers to stop a Mexican rebellion in central Mexico. A group of powerful Creoles approached Iturbide and convinced him to betray his Spanish commander. He agreed to fight alongside them with his army in the Creoles' fight for independence. In exchange, Iturbide was to have the power to dictate the terms of Mexico's independence. In September of 1821, Iturbide led troops to conquer Mexico City, the center of Spanish government. He declared himself the head of the new independent government of Mexico. Spanish officials escaped and returned to Spain. Mexico was now independent. The Mexicans had fought for their freedom for 11 years and may have lost as many as 600,000 lives. At last, their long years of sacrifice had paid off. They were free. But the Creoles couldn't agree on how Mexico's government should work. Some people wanted a monarchy ruled by a king. Others desired a republic like the United States, governed by Mexico's citizens. Iturbide decided for everyone in 1822 when he established a monarchy by declaring himself Emperor Agustín I. He was not a good ruler, and the people turned against him. By 1823, he was dethroned. Republic. After Iturbide was dethroned, a Congress was established. This Congress wrote a constitution for a democratic country, similar to the United States. However, there were still major disagreements. One group wanted a strong central government and wanted Roman Catholicism to be the national religion. Another group wanted the states to have more power, and they wanted to be free to worship as they wished. At last, in 1824, the groups reached a compromise, and Mexico became a republic. They formed a national government led by a two-house Congress. A governor and a legislature led each state. The first president was Guadalupe Victoria. Do you know? Mexico's national flag was created in 1821. Green represents independence. White is for religious purity, and red stands for the Spanish who joined Mexicans in the fight for independence, plus the blood of Mexican heroes. Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, is not Mexican Independence Day. It celebrates the victory of a small group of Mexicans over the French army at the Battle of Puebla. Celebration! Mexican people will never forget the events that led to their country's independence. Mexican Independence Day is a huge fiesta or celebration every year throughout Mexico. Each year, the celebration begins on the night of September 15th. People all over Mexico gather in town centers. In Mexico City, around 500,000 people crowd into the city square. Everyone watches the clock. At exactly 11 p.m., the crowd quiets. Mexico's president comes out of the palace onto the balcony. He wears a sash of red, white, and green and carries a large Mexican flag. The president rings the same Liberty Bell that Hidalgo rang when he called the people to fight against the Spanish for their freedom. As Hidalgo did so many years ago, the president shouts, "Viva Mexico!" and "Viva la Independencia!" His voice booms through loudspeakers. The crowd screams, "Viva Mexico!" and "Viva la Independencia!" while they toss confetti and blow on their horns. Everyone sings Mexico's national anthem. Red, white, and green fireworks light the sky. Similar ceremonies take place all over Mexico at the same time. The next day, September 16th, is Independence Day. Mexicans celebrate with parades, feasts, rodeos, and horseback riding competitions. Statues of Hidalgo are decorated with red, white, and green flowers. It's a fine celebration in honor of Mexico's long, hard, yet rewarding fight for independence. Independence Timeline. By 15,000 BCE, first native inhabitants are known to be living in Mexico at this time. 1200 to 200 BCE, the Olmec civilization prospers. 300 to 900, the Maya civilization prospers. 1300 to 1520, the Aztec civilization prospers. 1325, the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan is founded on the island in Lake Texcoco. 1520, Hernán Cortés, aided by allied enemies of Montezuma, takes over Tenochtitlan for Spain. 1520 to 1810, Mexico is a colony of Spain. 1810, Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla leads the revolution against Spain. 1821, Agustín de Iturbide leads the war for independence. Mexico wins independence. 1822, Iturbide is Mexico's first emperor. 1824, Mexico becomes a republic. Guadalupe Victoria is Mexico's first president.